Great. We'll kick it off then. Welcome to an emergency meeting of the Commission. Welcome to an emergency meeting of the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices. It's November 4th, the day before the election, and cases like this, if there's a complaint made within a certain period before the election, we're required to deal with it within 2 days. And so I want to thank the commissioners and staff and Mr. Bolton for making time to address these complaints, and we'll go right ahead. Mr. Wayne, you want to tell us about the first complaint?
Sure. This was a complaint by Ms. Jeanette Rivard, who's participating in the meeting, and it was about an expenditure that was planned for by the Maine Republican Party, and it's identified in the complaint as though it's been made by the Overstock Republican Committee, but we've identified that actually it was going to be paid for by the Maine Republican Party. And it was to a radio station in the Caribou area named the Bennett Radio Group. And it was for, as I heard from the owner of the radio group over the weekend, it was going to be for 18 breaks, which he called extended breaks of about 3 minutes each, in which there'd be a broadcast of a recorded interview and featuring one candidate. And as was described to me by the radio group owner, 9 of the breaks were going to be for an interview of Ms. Bernard, who is a candidate for state senate. And then there were going to be 9 other breaks that were going to feature 5 other candidates. The compliance issue that was raised in the complaint is this an expenditure that is being made by the party committee in consultation with Ms. Bernard and the other candidates, and thereby is it a contribution to their campaigns? And I received an update from Attorney Josh Tardy, who's joined us, that the Maine Republican Party is now intending to cancel that expenditure. And in fact, when I was emailing with the radio group owner for the weekend, he explained that time had been reserved, but the payment had not actually been received, and it was expected to be received today. But there's apparently there's going to be some kind of cancellation. So that's the factual development that not all the parties may be aware of, but I just heard about this morning.
Thank you very much.
I can go into more legal issues if you want, but that's sort of the lay of the land as of this morning.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for Mr. Wayne?
No.
Okay, great. Ms. Rivard, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. I think the staff has summarized the issue very thoroughly, and I don't have anything to add.
Terrific. Thank you. Mr. Tardy, would you like to address us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. So as Director Wayne has indicated, the Maine Republican Party is canceling the expenditure and has notified the radio station accordingly. And my sense is this is the role that ethics can play as a compliance facilitator versus enforcement. And to Mr. Wayne's comments and his summary memo to the commission, I think that ends the matter as it relates to the Maine Republican Party. And I'll leave it to Mr. Wayne's discretion if he wants to keep you apprised on all the other things you're doing to make sure that the Democrats are appropriately brought into compliance as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tardy. Any questions from commissioners for Mr. Tardy? Okay, great. Ms. Bernard, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I want to thank Mr. Tardy for taking care of this.
Terrific.
And the commission for taking the time on a Monday morning.
And I join you in thanking everybody for making this an issue of compliance instead of an issue for discipline. So I would like to make a motion that since it appears that there will not be any violation of the regulations, that we take no further issue on this, or no further action on this complaint. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to inquire of Director Wayne if he's in support of that.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Since we're all remote, I'll call the roll call vote. Commissioner Leclerc,
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings,
Yes.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
and I'll also vote yes. So as Josh kind of expertly stated, this was an issue where the commission could actually help somebody comply with the law instead of having to issue penalties. So thank you to all involved.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to
Thank-
complaint
thank
number
you.
2. Sure.
Actually, I think we owe a thanks to the complainant for bringing this to our attention to prevent a violation.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now moving on to issue number 2, a complaint against the Municipal Ballot Question Committee, capevoters.com. And I think we have Ms. Bierman is the complainant, and Mary Ann Lynch.
I'm here, Mary Ann Lynch, the treasurer of Cape Voters, and Jim Walsh, who's our principal officer, is also here alongside me.
Terrific. We appreciate it. The way we
Thanks.
usually deal with these is I'll have Mr. Wayne give us the factual background, and then we'll hear from the two sides of the issue, and then we'll make a decision. So, Mr. Wayne?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a complaint by Ms. Bierman about the capevoters.com ballot question committee, which is registered with us in filing campaign finance reports. And this relates to a school construction borrowing referendum that's going to be considered tomorrow by voters in Cape Elizabeth. And capevoters.com, Ms. Lynch's group, has been filing campaign finance reports with us, and Ms. Bierman in her complaint raised 3 issues with us. I won't go through, I'll just name them real quickly. One relates to the fact that capevoters.com has a website, but there didn't appear to be, at the time of the complaint, any expenditures disclosed in relation with that website. Second issue related to a mailing that voters received right around October 31st in Cape Elizabeth. And Ms. Bierman was inquiring whether that should have been reflected in a 24-hour report by capevoters.com, because we're in the last 13 days before the election, and it probably was an expenditure that exceeded $1,000. The third issue was a concern that was capevoters.com receiving any kind of a discount from its vendor that was outside the ordinary course of business, and if so, should capevoters.com have been reporting any kind of an in-kind contribution, I guess, maybe from the vendor. So we looked into that as well. So,
And what was the results of your investigation?
well, Ms. Bierman was very prompt in responding on all 3 issues. Her response on the issue of the discount issue, she said to me in writing, we have not been provided with any discounts or special payment schedules or arrangements.
I don't think Ms. Bierman.
Jonathan, is that,
maybe
Did I say Ms.
That's
Bierman? I'm sorry, Ms. Lynch. I apologize.
Yeah.
It was Ms. Lynch on behalf of capevoters.com who was very responsive on Friday with all sorts of information by email and invoices. I apologize. So then I took it upon myself to call Spectrum Marketing Companies, and I spoke to Ms. Carrie Marsh by phone. It wasn't like a prearranged interview. I just sort of caught her by surprise. I think she was maybe even a little taken aback by the regulator was calling her directly. But I talked to her about the invoice that I had seen, and I explained that the invoice I had seen for I think it was the first mailing said that 4,096 pieces had been printed and sent, and the unit price was 52 cents per piece. And the total charge was $2,129.92. That was the information on the invoice. I think it was for the first mailing. And I said an issue had been raised with us whether this was some sort of discount. She said, oh no, this is not a discount. And I said, is the unit price of 52 cents per unit, is there anything unusual about that price? And she said no. And she went on to explain that this was an example of saturation mailing, where a piece of mail is sent to every household in the area, and the postage is less expensive, and therefore the overall price per unit is less expensive. So from her point of view, that explains the unit price very well, and there was no discount. So my recommendation to the commissioners on that is I'm not sure that there's any more need to investigate that particular issue.
Okay, terrific. Do any commissioners have questions for Mr. Wayne? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Ms. Bierman, you brought this complaint. Do you want to address this?
Yes, thank you. And in particular, I just wanted to take this time. I know that you already probably have the complaint that I filed, but there was some information that was shared back with me about the investigation in the Mr. Wayne's report that I just wanted to sort of highlight as a concern why I proceeded with this complaint. But I also just wanted to thank the Ethics Commission and the staff and the commissioners for meeting about this. I am genuinely grateful for these reporting roles and for the transparency that they bring to ballot questions, especially now in all municipalities in Maine. This issue came up in 2022 for me on a very similar issue in town, a school referendum bond. And I formed a ballot question committee and was shocked to learn that there were no spending limits, no reporting requirements. It was honestly disheartening. And I think that the transparency in advocacy is so important, which is why I would even bother filing a complaint. And I believe that the community is served by both compliance with the letter and the spirit of the law. And so while I have read the director's recommendation that there be no violation found for the 3 items, and you know, I don't have an issue with not pursuing a de minimis and, you know, accidental omission potentially of website hosting costs. And if if my understanding of the cost of the mailer was wrong, I totally accept that, that's fine. But what I still don't understand is how a direct mailer that went out that says paid for by Cape voters was apparently not paid for by Cape voters and was somehow then not a reportable expense under the 24-hour rules that are in effect since the mailing was sent out. And if I could just explain my reasoning on that, my concern is that the statutory scheme in section in chapter 21A, but in section 1052 subsection 4A2, an expenditure is defined as a contract, a promise, or an agreement, express or implied, whether or not legally enforceable, to make any expenditure. And so the issue is in all the prior campaigns that the same group of people in our town has run, they always send 3 mailers. It's an old adage, I think, that you need to have 3 mailers go out for there to be effective communication. And I have no idea whether they had an agreement with their vendor up front. It would be material to know that, but it's unknown to me. But what is known is that our town received a mailer that says, paid for by Cape voters. It had their name, their messaging. And I just don't understand how they could have worked with a vendor on a mailer. And then all of a sudden somebody comes in and signs the check for it. And how that wasn't in their mind and in the mind of their vendor, Spectrum Marketing, an express or an implied agreement that mailer was going to be paid for. And then it says paid for by Cape voters on it. And previously, Cape voters reported that they themselves paid for the last 2 mailers directly. And it just, and I know that Ms. Lynch, based on Mr. Wayne's report, spent some time talking extensively was the word to the Maine Ethics Commission before this. So this was an intentional plan. There might be some reasons for that that I don't understand and that are quite legitimate, but when you pay for the first 2 mailers directly, and then on the third mailer, declare it as an in-kind contribution, when you would otherwise have to report it, both report that expenditure, it just feels like the community is being misled, and that's the purpose of these rules, is to avoid the community being misled about who's paying for what. And at a minimum, I don't understand how there was this potentially implied agreement that Cape Voters would pay for this mailer and help create this mailer that had all their website information on it, and then all of a sudden it was paid for by somebody else, and that is now an in-kind donation. And at the very least, this was unknown to me at the time, of course, when I wrote my complaint, but the statute also requires that whenever a person makes an expenditure exceeding $500, their name and address shall appear on it if they financed the expenditure. That's section 1055A. And so I believe in transparency. I believe in these rules, and I believe in the work that you're doing, and I understand the director's recommendation, but I just don't understand how this can coexist. So I appreciate you taking a closer look at it. And that's why I didn't withdraw the complaint. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bierman. Mr. Wayne or Mr. Bolton, would you like to address the legal framework?
I might jump in if that's okay, John. We were focused, when I wrote the staff memo, we were focused on the issue of whether we needed a 24-hour report, whether one should have been filed with this. And since I think there is an explanation for why Ms. Sandy Dunham paid for this rather than the committee. And I don't want to speculate on it because I've just seen some emails and heard snippets of things. So I don't want to express what it was, but for some reason, Ms. Dunham paid for it rather than the committee, and she's not getting reimbursed by the committee. So it really isn't, she really is the person who is financing the expenditure for that third mailing. Our view, so Ms. Lynch had a lot of email correspondence with my colleague Heidi Heffler, in which the gist of it was, and I just skimmed it, but it was like, are you sure we don't have to file a 24-hour report for this? Because the cost is over $1,000. And my colleague Heidi reassured Marianne Lynch that this was because Ms. Dunham was paying for it rather than the committee. This is a contribution to the committee. It's not an expenditure by the committee. And there are different thresholds. It's just the way the law works, that the threshold for a committee's receipt of a contribution that needs to be reported within 24 hours is higher. It's $5,000. So because the cost of this mailing was $2,129, it fell below that $5,000 contribution reporting threshold for 24-hour reports. So our view is, which Heidi expressed to Marianne Lynch, and which I agree with, was that the committee, once it received this value of a mailing from its supporter, because that value was under 5,000, there didn't need to be a 24-hour report. Now, as to the disclosure on the mailer, I actually think there is an inaccuracy in the message on the mailer. So it's kind of blurry in the complaint that you got. But if you look at the image of the third mailer that Ms. Bierman provided, in the address section of the mailer, it says paid for by capevoters.com. And that might have intended that, depending on the factual background, maybe there was an intent at some point for capevoters.com to pay for it, but that's not the way it worked out. Actually, Sandy Dunham paid for it. So from my point of view, the disclosure statement on the mailer is not accurate. And if you wanted to take action on that, that wasn't identified by Ms. Bierman in her complaint, but that is something that you could consider making a statement on, or possibly even calling it a violation, because I don't think it really is an accurate statement of who financed the expenditure. But, you know, from my point of view, we know in sort of the heat of these local campaigns, a lot can happen. Maybe one person is going to pay for it and then somebody else pays for it. And Sometimes there are miscommunications with vendors. Sometimes vendors just assume it's being paid for by one person when it's not being, or somebody's going to reimburse it. So, mistakes happen was sort of my take on the situation, which is why I wasn't recommending any action on it. I was willing to skip over it myself as the staff director. But if you wanted to take action on it, you could.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Mr. Bolton, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Mr. Wayne has summarized it very well, and I'm in agreement with his analysis, obviously, and I also agree that it does appear there's, at least a de minimis violation of the disclosure requirement, assuming that this was in fact a contribution from a third party. But that's obviously in your discretion what you want to do with that.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Are there questions from commissioners for Ms. Bierman or Mr. Wayne or Mr. Bolton? Commissioner Leclerc.
So there's no dispute that the mailers have the wrong information. It was not paid for by Cape voters. It was paid for by a specific individual. And is that correct?
Well, we haven't heard from the respondent yet, so I don't know.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll wait
I'd like
then.
to speak to this issue when it's appropriate, please.
I'll
Why not?
question.
We can make it appropriate now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that. And the time of the staff. This actually is a new issue. It was not raised with me on Friday when I tried to be as responsive as possible to all of the issues that were raised. And I'll just go into the facts of it. We had only 2 mailers planned in this campaign. That was all we had the money for. And on October 19th, there was a mailer from Ms. Bierman's group that it contained so much misinformation that we felt that it demanded a response. So we began to write an ad. We had no more money left in our campaign till. But again, we felt it demanded an ad. And as we were drafting the ad, we were trying to find donors who would pay for the ad. We also had a concern about the fact that if you take a check, the bank holds it for 5 days, which of course, if that had happened, would have meant we would not have gotten the mailer out. So we were looking for a donor that would agree to pay for our advertisement. And we were fortunate that Sandy Dunham agreed to do that, and she put it on her credit card. It didn't occur to me that it would be anything different than if she had sent a check and we had done it. And as you know, we consulted with your staff at some length. And I did that largely because I could see that if it was an expenditure of ours, it would have been in the 24-hour reporting period, but it was not a direct expenditure of ours. I believed it was an in-kind contribution and talked about with the staff on how to record that. It honestly did not occur to me that the postcard should have Sandy Dunham's name on it, since it was our ad and she was paying for it. She was making a contribution to pay for our ad. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, but it came about very quickly in response to a mailing from Ms. Bierman's group that we felt was very misleading, and we didn't have a whole lot of time to get something out in time to get into mailboxes before Election Day.
Thank you
And
very
I'll
much, Ms. Lynch.
answer any other questions if you have any.
I'll see if any of the commissioners have any questions to ask. Does anyone?
I guess I have one question.
Sure, Commissioner Hastings.
Thank you. Somehow to me, why isn't it both a contribution and an expenditure at the same time? Money came in, money went out. I do appreciate that Ms. Lynch talked to the staff. You did exactly what should be done. You called the staff and asked. It's a hard question to me, but why isn't it both a contribution and an expenditure?
That's,
Actually, Ms. Lynch, I think I'll let Mr. Wayne or Mr. Bolton answer
Okay.
that.
I did just want to say, though, that was very much my concern a week and a half, 10 days ago, whenever it was, when I reached out to the staff on how to record this, and isn't this a contribution and an expenditure, or is it just an in-kind expenditure? There did not seem to be any place that it could be both. And thank
Great.
you.
Mr. Wayne or Mr. Bolton?
Well, just to be clear about the facts of the flow of the money, it might have been contemplated at some point that the ballot question committee would pay for it. I don't know if it ever reached the point where it made a promise or an agreement to pay for it. I don't know if actually that point was reached or not by the committee. So what did in fact happen is that Sandy Dunham used her personal credit card to pay Spectrum marketing companies directly. So the way we were breaking it down here at the staff is it's an expenditure by Sandy Dunham, but it's as it relates to the committee, it's a contribution to the committee.
Are there other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Leclerc.
So I'm as confused, I think, as about this as was just mentioned by Commissioner Hastings. But I'm also wanted to address the issue of the notice that appeared on the mailer, which attributed it to Cape voters. And we're now hearing that that's inaccurate. And the description of it is a de minimis violation. And I'm just, I understand everything, how this transpired, and that there was a genuine effort to comply with the law, which is evidenced by Cape voters contacting commission staff. But are not the voters entitled to know who paid for this mailer? And I mean, it's may be very relevant information. I have no knowledge of the background of any of this. I don't know who the people are that are involved, but is it relevant to this issue in the election regarding this issue that this particular person, whoever they are, made this contribution, which is a significant contribution and a significant effort to get a message out to the voters in the community? Is that not relevant information? Why is it considered de minimis? That they're not entitled, they're not being given that notice. It's kind of like I'm seeing it go two ways. But anyway, that's my question.
Mr. Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify. I may have misspoke, but what I meant to say was that it appears that there's at least a de minimis violation, and I phrased it. I should have phrased it that way if I didn't, because I think it's completely up to the commissioner's discretion to decide how serious a violation it is. But the point I was making, or was hoping to make anyway, was that it does appear that the statute, the wrong name was on the postcard, based on what we've heard.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, I just wanted to see if you were addressing your comment question to anybody specific, or if you were just discussing the situation.
Well, I appreciate you directing it to Mr. Bolton. And I also appreciate that, there was no notice to the respondent here today or maybe there was no notice to the respondent here today that this was going to be an issue, but I do see it as an issue. I mean, it's the end result that the public should be notified as to who is behind things like this, and the wrong name is on it, and is there a remedy for that? is my question to whoever can answer it.
Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Mr. Wayne.
Well, I know Ms. Lynch wants to respond. If you're looking, I didn't mean to imply that this was a non-issue. This is something that I raised as a compliance issue with Ms. Lynch by email just about half an hour ago. I can't remember if it occurred to me before or after I completed the packet, to be really honest. And like I said, in the breadth of my experience, I know people make mistakes and vendors make mistakes. And it would have been really good if either some party to this expenditure had said, oh, wait a minute, we got to put Ms. Dunham's name on that mailer, not the name of the committee. So I do think it may be a low level of fault, but I really wish someone had taken that step to make sure the disclosure statement is accurate. So if you're looking for an action you can take, there has not been very much notice at all to the committee about this, but you could call it a violation and you could assess a penalty. I would recommend nothing more than $50, which was a penalty that you assessed for another group, the Freeport group, but for a mailing, but they didn't have any disclosure on it. At least here there was a disclosure intended. It's just in the development of how this happened, it's the wrong name. So again, and notice an opportunity to be heard is very important. So it really wasn't really raised with the committee until just an hour ago or half an hour ago.
Ms. Lynch, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Yes. I'll leave the notice an opportunity to be heard for the end, but I do want to say it was very much a contribution to the committee. We wrote the ad. Cape Voters wrote the ad. It was connected to our website. It is consistent with all of our mailings. It was not Sandy Dunham's. She paid for it, which is why we took it in as an in-kind contribution. If she had mailed it, or if she had put her name on it, I suspect we would be here today with Ms. Bierman saying that this was some kind of joint effort that we had done and engaged in. So I feel as if we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, but we took it in as a contribution. We recorded it at that time as a contribution. And if it wasn't our ad, but we wrote it, everything, the layout, everything is our work. So and again, I did not have notice of this as an issue until, I don't know, half an hour or an hour ago. And even then it wasn't clear to me, I guess, that what was going to be focused on was the card. So if this is an issue, I think that the committee should give us an opportunity to prepare for that and respond again. I tried to be very responsive last Friday and tried a week and a half ago with the committee, with the commission staff, and was very clear that we were taking a contribution in. So if it's a contribution, then it would seem to me it would be paid for by Cape Voters as an in-kind contribution, or else it's not a contribution, in which case we wouldn't record it as an in-kind contribution. But I do think that Ms. Bierman would have her objections if we had gone that route. And I think,
I want to commend you for consulting with the commission staff. I think that was exactly right. And I want to commend you for your responsiveness to this last minute complaint. What's the sense of the commission? Does anybody want to make a motion? Yes, Mr. Bolton.
I realize I can't make a motion, but I guess I would just before you move to that phase, the one observation I would make where the respondent to the complaint is raising a concern about adequate notice. I think that's something I would recommend that the commission take that into consideration. And there's always obviously the opportunity that if you were inclined to look harder at this disclaimer issue, you could set that on an agenda for a future meeting. So I just wanted to give my advice on that issue.
Right, I appreciate it, and I was thinking the same thing. I think there are two paths to go down. We could have the path of considering the attribution to Cape voters as a minor kind of issue, and we could decide to take no further action. We could do that today. I think if we decide to take any further action, I think we need to commit it to the staff for some more investigation, and we can deal with it at our normal monthly meeting. So how do people feel? Commissioner Hastings.
You know, listen.
Yeah, Commissioner Hastings.
I heard Lynch say at one point that Sandy Dearman couldn't give her a check, they'd have to hold it for 5 days. But just as easily, if Sandy Dunham had $2,100 in cash and had given it to them, they would have used that to pay for the ad that they had prepared, and it would have been a contribution and an expense, which makes the most sense to me. The ad was prepared by Cape voters, and they only used the credit card route as a way to create instant funds. To tell you, as far as I can see, I suspect Sandy Dunham would have given you a check too, but then you were a little leery about turning that right over to the mail house because it hasn't cleared yet. So this is just another way of transferring $2,129 in effect to the Cape voters, in my mind. In my mind, there was both a contribution and an expenditure, each of which could have been reported, but I certainly do not fault. It's complicated, I think, by the way the statute is written. So I just really, there's no harm, no foul in a way here. There was an attempt to do it the right way and done the way that the commission staff indicated. And the contribution, the attribution, the actual mailing, which people received correctly, in my mind, identified the party behind it. And that's really the purpose of the whole statute, is to identify who's behind these types of communications. So I don't know quite what the motion would be, but I certainly, on the suspected discount, I think in my mind, we should take no action on that. And on the 24-hour report, I would recommend I would move that we take no further action. But I don't know what
Is there a second for that?
motion is.
I'll second that. Commissioner Leclerc.
I was going to second the motion.
Oh, okay. I will let you second that motion. Is there further discussion? Yes, Commissioner Marble.
Just an observation. This won't offer any new information to anyone, I don't believe. But the first thing I want to say is it's evident that we're right up against Election Day, that people have been invested in this on both sides, and there's frustration on both sides. It's also evident that in this case, the actual words around laws and regulations may be just a tiny bit lacking in clarity, but we can't anticipate every application every day. I do want to say that in my mind, this would be a different discussion if the returned address on the mailer had, say, distributed by and had left out the word paid. But that said, I agree with Commissioner Hastings' analysis, and I'll be supporting that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Is further discussion from commissioners? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we take no further action on this complaint. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. So thank you, Ms. Bierman and Ms. Lynch, for being here to help us work through this. Thank you, commissioners, for taking part of your Monday to deal with emergency problems. And thank you, Mr. Wayne and Mr. Bolton, for helping us out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I One
Have a
thing,
great, oh, yes,
Mr. Wayne, could we look into going forward, whether using my credit card to pay a committee's bill represents a payment by them or not? It's just another way of the committee paying that bill if I pay it for them. So I don't know if our statute definition is broad enough to even cover that.
that might be worth a brief memo for the commission, if you and Mr. Bolton could kind of put your heads together on that.
Absolutely.
That would be great, because it is, I mean, it's a good, solid question that has come to the commission's attention. So I think it's worth addressing.
So we're
I
talking
would
about,
I
You-
agree.
You might want to expand that because Venmo and other forms of instant payment are becoming much more part of the landscape than it might have been when the statute or whatever was written. Just
Very
a,
true.
just a
Very true.
thought process, because that would have been one other avenue.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Sure. So Mr. Wayne and Mr. Bolton, do you have a decent handle on what the question is?
yes,
Terrific. Terrific. All right. Is there a motion to send us all on our way?
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. We'll have a vote. Commissioner Hastings,
Yes.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Exit. Okay, so let me get up here, I guess.